It hurts being without a man, the giant Apache girl said the shy farmer. The village was quiet that early morning. Smoke rose from the chimneys of small houses, and the scent of fresh bread from the baker's oven floated through the streets.
Birds chirped in the distance, and the soft rustle of wind through the trees made the world feel calm. In this little village, life was simple, predictable, and sometimes lonely. The villagers knew each other by sight, and everyone had their routines, but there were always stories that moved quietly beneath the surface. Among the people of the village, one figure stood out, like a shadow against the sun. She was tall, much taller than most women in the village, with broad shoulders and strong arms that hinted at the life she had lived. She was an Apache girl, though the villagers had never seen someone quite like her before. Her hair was long and dark, falling in waves to her waist. Her eyes were sharp, alert, and a deep brown that seemed to carry both strength and sadness. People called her the giant Apache girl in whispers, not out of cruelty, but because her presence was so commanding that it could not be ignored. Despite her strength and height, there was a softness about her. Bound, she moved carefully, almost shyly, when she entered the village. Her eyes would scan the streets, sometimes meeting the gaze of a villager before quickly dropping down to the ground. There was something lonely about her, something that no amount of strength could hide. She walked with purpose, yet it was clear she carried a quiet pain, one that she did not speak aloud, but that everyone could sense in the way she held herself. On that morning, she had come to the market. The market was small, just a collection of stalls and carts along the main street, where farmers brought vegetables, fruits, and grains from the fields. There were bakers, blacksmiths, and a few traders who came from other towns to sell cloth and tools. The Apache girl moved from stall to stall, examining things with a careful hand, picking up items only to put them back again. She needed supplies, but she seemed unsure of how to ask for them or how to trade, as if each interaction carried a weight she did not want. The villagers watched her with curiosity. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts, whispering her name and giggling softly. Some older women shook their heads, muttering about her size and how unusual it was for a girl to be so tall and strong. But there was no fear in her. She did not lash out or complain. Instead, she carried herself with dignity, even in her hesitation. She seemed to belong somewhere between the world she came from and the world she had stepped into, not quite fitting into either. It was near the edge of the market that she struggled. A large sack of grain, far heavier than she had expected, toppled from her arms, spilling a cascade of golden kernels onto the cobblestone. She bent quickly to gather them, her fingers brushing against the rough stones, and let out a small sigh of frustration. She had been trying so hard to do everything on her own, to prove to herself that she could manage, but moments like this reminded her of her limits. The shy farmer noticed immediately. He was not a man of many words and preferred the quiet of his farm to the noise of the market. But he had an eye for those who struggled, patched at the knees, and his hands were calloused from years of tilling the soil.
Brace. He approached her slowly, careful not to startle her, and knelt to help lift the heavy sack.
"Here," he said softly, offering the sack so she could set it down safely.
His voice was gentle, almost hesitant, like a whisper carried on the wind. "Let me help you with that." The Apache girl froze for a moment, startled by the offer. She had not expected anyone to notice her struggle, let alone offer assistance. Breath. There was pride in her, too, a pride that had been built through years of relying on herself, but something in his calm, quiet manner made her hesitate. Finally, she nodded, allowing him to take the sack. "Thank you," she said, her voice low but steady. He smiled briefly, not a wide grin, but enough to show warmth. "Brace, no need to thank me. It's just a sack of grain." As he helped her, she felt a strange sense of relief. She had spent so much time being alone, managing tasks that should have been shared or easier with someone else's help. But here was a man who did not judge her strength or size, who only saw the immediate need and acted to assist. There was comfort in that simplicity, a comfort she had not felt in a long time. After the sack was secured, they walked together toward the nearest stall where she intended to trade for vegetables. The farmer stayed slightly behind her, giving her space, yet remaining close enough that she could feel a quiet presence beside her. It was unusual for the Apache girl to feel safe around someone she barely knew, but with him, the tension she usually carried in her shoulders seemed to ease just a little. She began to speak, hesitantly at first, asking about prices and how to trade fairly. The farmer guided her through it, explaining in simple words which vegetables were best for cooking and which could be stored longer. She listened attentively, asking questions here and there, her eyes lighting up slightly with interest. For the first time that morning she laughed, a soft, melodic sound that drew a few curious glances from the villagers. The shy farmer felt a small warmth in his chest. He had lived a quiet life, rarely speaking to anyone outside his family or the market. Yet here was someone who seemed different, someone who moved through the world with a mix of strength and vulnerability. There was something honest in her curiosity and something courageous in the way she faced each task, no matter how small. He felt drawn to her in a way he could not explain, though he tried to ignore it. By the time the market was nearly done, the Apache girl had managed to gather all the supplies she had come for. She turned to thank the farmer once more, and this time her smile lingered. "I appreciate your help," she said with a small laugh.
I usually manage on my own, but today was harder than I thought. He nodded, smiling faintly. We all need help sometimes, he said.
Even the strongest among us. Her eyes softened, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, neither knowing exactly what to say next. There was a quiet understanding, an unspoken connection that neither fully recognized but both felt. It was the beginning of something neither could have planned, a spark that would grow slowly and quietly, much like the seeds sown in the farmer's fields. As the sun climbed higher, the Apache girl prepared to leave the market. She carried her supplies carefully, making sure not to spill anything, and glanced back at the shy farmer. There was a small nod between them, a silent promise that this meeting was not the last. The farmer watched her go, feeling a strange emptiness where her presence had been, as if the world had dimmed slightly in her absence. The villagers, too, noticed. Whispers began to spread. The tall Apache girl had someone helping her, someone who treated her kindly. Some were curious, others skeptical. But the Apache girl and the shy farmer paid little attention to the gossip. Their connection was quiet, private, and fragile. And they both knew that the world outside might not understand it yet. That evening, as the village settled into its usual rhythm, the Apache girl walked along the edge of the fields, her thoughts wandering. She reflected on the day, on the quiet strength of the man who had helped her, and on the loneliness she often felt. She realized that it hurt to be without someone who understood her, someone who could see past her size and strength to the girl within. For the first time in a long while, she felt hope, small, tentative, but real. The shy farmer, meanwhile, returned to his farm, his hands still dusty from the grain and the soil. He thought of her gentle voice, her laughter, and the way she had looked at him without fear. There was a warmth in his chest, an unfamiliar emotion that made him both nervous and excited. He had never felt this way before, and he did not fully understand it, but he knew he wanted to see her again. Breath. And so, in the quiet of the evening, both the Apache girl and the shy farmer carried with them the memory of a simple act of kindness, an encounter that had changed something inside each of them. They did not yet know what the future held, but for the first time they'd both sensed that perhaps in each other they might find the understanding, companionship, and even love they had been quietly longing for. The day ended, but in the hearts of the giant Apache girl and the shy farmer, a seed had been planted. It was small and delicate, but it held the promise of something much greater, something that could grow with patience, courage, and care. And neither of them would forget it, for it was the beginning of a journey that neither had expected. Yet both would treasure for the rest of their lives. Days passed after their first encounter in the market, and life in the village continued in its quiet rhythm, breath. Yet, for the giant Apache girl, the memory of the shy farmer lingered. She found herself thinking about him often, about his quiet voice, his gentle hands, and the unexpected kindness he had shown her. It was unusual for her to feel this drawn to someone, but there was something about him that stirred a curiosity she had never known before. One morning, she decided to visit his farm. She did not announce herself, fearing she might intrude, but something within her told her that being near him, even silently, would ease the loneliness she carried. The farm was not far from the village, a modest plot of land surrounded by wooden fences and green fields. Crops swayed gently in the morning breeze, and the soft cluck of hens and the lowing of cows filled the air. It was a quiet, simple place, just like the farmer himself. When she arrived, the farmer was in the fields, bent over rows of growing vegetables. He looked up and froze for a moment, surprised to see her standing at the edge of his farm. His heart leapt in a way that made him feel both nervous and excited. He wiped the sweat from his brow and offered a small, cautious smile. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice carrying the same gentle tone as before. "Good morning," he replied, his voice slightly hesitant. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to see the farm," she said, glancing at the rows of green plants. Breaths. "And maybe help, if you don't mind." He nodded, a mixture of surprise and relief crossing his face. "Of course, there's always work to do." And so she stepped into the field, her large hands brushing against the leaves of the vegetables. She moved carefully, not wanting to damage anything, yet her strength made the work easier than she expected. The farmer watched her quietly, noting how precise and careful she was despite her size. There was a grace in her movements, a balance of power and gentleness that fascinated him. As the morning wore on, they worked side by side. The Apache girl learned how to water the plants efficiently, how to check for weeds, and how to care for the soil. The farmer explained each step patiently, never rushing her, always encouraging her to take her time. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in the Apache lands, stories of wide open spaces, of hunting with her family, and of lessons learned from her elders. The farmer listened intently, his curiosity growing. He had lived a quiet life, tied closely to the rhythm of the seasons, but her stories opened a world he had never imagined. He asked questions, sometimes clumsy but sincere, and she answered them with patience. He realized that he enjoyed her company in a way he had never expected. It was comforting, yet exciting, like discovering a hidden path through the forest. As they worked, they began to talk about more personal matters. The Apache girl spoke of her loneliness, of how it hurt to be without someone who truly understood her. "It's strange," she said quietly, pausing to wipe sweat from her forehead. I am strong. I can do many things alone. But sometimes it still hurts. Being without a man, someone to share life with, it leaves a space that nothing else fills.
The farmer's heart tightened at her words.
He had always admired her strength, but hearing her speak of her vulnerability made him see her in a new light. He wanted to tell her that he understood, that he could be the companion she sought, but shyness held him back. Instead, he nodded and said softly, "I think everyone feels that way sometimes. Even the strongest of us need someone to share the burden." She glanced at him, her eyes searching his face for meaning. There was something honest in his words, something that made her feel seen in a way she had rarely experienced. She smiled faintly, a small, shy gesture, and returned to her work. The morning passed quickly, filled with laughter and conversation. She taught him a few tricks she had learned while hunting and gathering, like how to identify the best plants for cooking or how to move quietly through the fields. He was clumsy at first, but he tried earnestly, and she could not help but laugh at his awkward attempts. Her laughter was light and melodic, and the farmer felt a warmth in his chest that he could not ignore. By midday, they had finished most of the work. The Apache girl sat down on a wooden bench near the farmhouse, taking a moment to catch her breath. The farmer joined her, leaning against the fence, and they shared a simple meal of bread, cheese, and fresh vegetables. They ate in comfortable silence at first, then slowly began talking again, this time about their dreams and hopes.
I want to see the world beyond the village someday, she said, staring at the horizon.
But I also feel tied to my people, to my land. It's confusing, wanting something different while feeling obligated to what is expected. The farmer nodded, understanding more than she realized. I think many people feel that way, he said. I've always wanted a life that is simple and steady, but sometimes I wonder if that is enough. If there is more out there, I would like to see it too. They fell silent, both thinking about the balance between desire and duty, between independence and companionship. In that quiet moment, an unspoken understanding grew between them. They did not need to say everything aloud. Their presence alone spoke volumes. Bursa. Over the next few weeks, the Apache girl began visiting the farm regularly. Each visit strengthened their bond. They worked together, shared meals, and slowly opened their hearts to each other. The villagers began to notice their growing friendship, and while some were curious, others were skeptical. But the girl and the farmer paid little attention to gossip. Their world was small, and their focus was on understanding each other, learning from each other, and discovering the rare comfort of companionship. The Apache girl began to trust the farmer more each day. She would confide in him about moments of doubt, fears she had long hidden, and her longing for someone who could see beyond her strength. The farmer, in turn, shared stories of his childhood, the quiet joys and struggles of farm life, and the dreams he had quietly nurtured. In each other they found a listener, a supporter, and slowly, a friend they could rely upon. One afternoon, as they worked in the fields under the warm sun, the Apache girl paused and looked at the farmer. I feel better when I am here, she admitted quietly. It is strange, because I am not used to relying on anyone. But with you, I feel safe, even when I feel small inside.
The farmer's heart swelled.
He had never been confident with words, especially about matters of the heart, but he wanted her to know he felt the same. He smiled gently and said, I feel the same. You make the farm, and everything else, feel brighter. I did not know I could feel this way about anyone. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other, the connection between them deepening without the need for grand gestures or declarations. It was quiet, simple, and profound, a bond built not on expectation, but on understanding, respect, and shared moments of life.
Even as the days grew longer and their friendship strengthened, the Apache girl sometimes felt a pang of sadness.
She remembered the stories from her family, the expectations she carried, and the loneliness that had been a part of her life for so long. Yet, each time she looked at the shy farmer, the fear eased. She realized that perhaps she could have both, strength and vulnerability, independence and companionship, if she allowed herself to trust someone fully. The farmer, too, felt changes within himself. He was less shy, more willing to speak his thoughts, and more confident in facing the world outside his small farm. Her presence brought out a courage he had never known existed in him. He began to look forward to her visits, to the sound of her laughter, to the quiet moments they shared after a day of work, as sunset each evening, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. They would often sit together on the fence, watching the light fade and sharing small stories of the day. The world around them was still, yet within their shared space, something new and fragile was growing. A friendship that hinted at love, a bond that promised understanding, and a connection that offered hope to two souls who had long felt alone. And so the giant Apache girl and the shy farmer continued to build their lives in quiet harmony. Through shared work, laughter, and stories, they discovered the value of companionship, the courage it took to be open, and the joy of finding someone who saw them as they truly were. Each day brought them closer, not just as friends, but as two hearts learning that it was possible to find comfort, trust, and perhaps even love in the most unexpected of places. The days of quiet companionship passed, and the bond between the giant Apache girl and the shy farmer grew steadily. They had settled into a comfortable rhythm, mornings in the fields, afternoons sharing small tasks, evenings watching the sunset together. Each day seemed brighter with the other's presence, yet beneath the calm surface, there was a tension neither of them fully acknowledged. Life, after all, had its own plans, and the world beyond the farm could not be ignored forever. It began with a letter. One late afternoon, as the Apache girl was helping him water the crops, a messenger arrived from her homeland. She took the letter in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. The farmer noticed immediately that something had changed in her expression. The usual light in her eyes was clouded with worry, and a quiet tension had settled around her like a shadow. I should read this alone," she said softly, turning toward the farmhouse. She held the letter close to her chest, as if it contained both guidance and obligation. The farmer nodded, understanding without pressing her. He had learned that she valued her independence and her pride. Breath. He stayed back, giving her space, while quietly hoping that whatever news it contained would not pull her away completely. Inside, the letter was from her family. They had learned of her presence in the village and of her growing friendship with the farmer. Their words were polite but firm. She was expected to return home soon, or at least consider a suitor chosen by her elders. Tradition was strong in her culture, and the family's expectations weighed heavily. The Apache girl read the letter twice, her heart sinking with each word. But she had known this day might come, but she had hoped it would arrive later, after she had more time to understand her own heart. When she returned to the fields, the letter folded carefully in her hands. She tried to mask her emotions. "It is nothing," she said quickly, forcing a small smile. "Just family matters." But the farmer could see through it. He noticed the slight quiver in her hands, the tightness around her mouth, and the shadow in her eyes.
Is it serious?
He asked cautiously, approaching her.
Yes,
she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Breath. "They want me to return, or at least meet someone they have chosen." Breath. She hesitated, then added, "I do not know what to do." The farmer's heart ached at her words. He had always feared this moment might come, yet hearing it aloud made the reality sharper. But he wanted to speak, to tell her that he cared for her, that she need not follow tradition blindly, but he froze. Shyness and doubt held him back. He wondered if he had any right to interfere in her life, even though a part of him screamed that he could not let her go without expressing his feelings.
For the next few days, a quiet distance settled between them.
They still worked together, but conversations were shorter, smiles more reserved. The Apache girl wrestled with her emotions. On one hand, she valued her independence and the freedom she had discovered in the village. On the other hand, the expectations of her family and the weight of her culture pressed heavily upon her. She began to wonder if her friendship, her growing feelings for the farmer, could survive such pressure. The farmer noticed her struggle, but did not know how to help. But his shyness, once a gentle part of his character, now felt like a barrier he could not cross. He worried that any attempt to speak honestly might push her away, or worse, make her feel trapped. Yet every time he saw her, his chest tightened with longing, and he realized that silence was becoming unbearable. Then a small misunderstanding occurred. The Apache girl had been asked by the villagers to accompany them to a meeting about trade between the village and neighboring settlements. She accepted politely, thinking it was a routine matter. The farmer, hearing that she might be away for the day, assumed she had chosen to prioritize others over their friendship. He stayed on the farm, feeling a pang of disappointment, not realizing that her intentions were innocent. When she returned, the tension between them was palpable. She greeted him with her usual softness, but the farmer's response was curt, his usual warmth restrained by frustration and hurt. "I thought you did not care about our work today," he said quietly, his eyes avoiding hers. I did not mean to upset you," she replied, confusion and hurt mingling in her tone. "It was only a meeting for the village." "I did not think it would matter to you." "It does matter," he admitted, his voice low. "Everything matters when I care about you." Her heart skipped a beat. His words were honest, but the timing, tangled with the worry from her family's letter, made her feel torn.
I care about you too.
But I am afraid that I will have to leave soon, that our friendship, everything we have built, might not survive. The farmer's chest tightened further. He wanted to hold her, to reassure her that they could face anything together. But fear held him back. The moment passed, leaving them both with a sense of quiet longing and unresolved tension. Over the next few weeks, the Apache girl grappled with her emotions. She spent time alone, walking through the fields and reflecting on her life. She thought about the strength she had relied on for so long, and about the quiet courage it took to care for someone else. She realized that her feelings for the farmer were more than friendship. They were a need for connection, for understanding, for someone who saw her as she truly was. Yet the weight of expectation pressed heavily. She did not want to disappoint her family, but she also did not want to lose the one person who had made her feel alive. The farmer, meanwhile, struggled with his own fears. He had always valued simplicity, but now he faced the complexity of emotions he could not ignore. He worried that he might never be enough for her, that his quiet, modest life could not compete with the pull of her family and her culture. Yet he also knew that he could not stand by silently while she faced her challenges alone. The thought of losing her, of never knowing if she could have been his, was unbearable. One evening, the Apache girl sat on the edge of the farm, looking at the fading light across the fields. The farmer joined her quietly, sitting a small distance away, respecting the space she seemed to need. They watched the sun sink behind the hills, the sky painted with streaks of orange and purple. "I do not know what to do," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I feel torn between two worlds. I want to stay, but I also want to honor my family." He turned to her, his expression earnest. "I cannot tell you what to do," he said softly. "But I want you to know, whatever you choose, I will not give up on you. I care about you too much to stay silent."
Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness alone, but of relief.
But someone saw her struggle. Someone understood the weight she carried, and that recognition meant more than words could express. She reached out, lightly touching his hand, a simple gesture that carried trust, connection, and hope. In the following days, their relationship entered a new stage. They no longer pretended that everything was simple. The Apache girl's impending departure hung over them like a quiet storm, and yet it brought clarity to their feelings. They spoke more openly, sharing fears and doubts, and learning to support each other despite the uncertainty. Every moment together became more precious, and they began to realize that love was not only about comfort, but also about courage. The courage to face challenges, to admit vulnerability, and to stand by each other even when the path ahead was unclear. The villagers noticed the change in their demeanor. Gone was the playful ease of early friendship. In its place was a quiet seriousness, a sense that both were grappling with something deeper. Some whispered about the Apache girl's family obligations, others about the shy farmer's boldness in standing by her.
Yet the two paid little attention to the gossip.
They knew that what mattered was not the world around them, but the bond they were nurturing quietly, patiently, and courageously. One afternoon, as a light rain began to fall, they ran to shelter beneath a large tree at the edge of the field. The droplets fell softly around them, drumming on the leaves and soil. They sat close, sharing warmth and silence, each lost in thought yet comforted by the other's presence. The Apache girl leaned slightly against the farmer, her heart full of both fear and hope. "I do not know if I can follow what is expected of me," she whispered.
"But I do know. I do not want to be without you."
He took her hand in both of his, holding it gently. "Then we will face this together," he said. "Psst. No matter what comes, we will not let it break what we have." And in that quiet moment, under the soft rain and the vast sky, both understood that life's challenges were not obstacles to love, but tests of it. They had each other, and for now that was enough to give them courage, hope, and the strength to face whatever the world might demand. The days grew warmer, and spring had settled fully into the village. Flowers bloomed along the edges of the fields, and the soft hum of insects filled the air. Yet for the giant Apache girl, the beauty of the season could not erase the weight she carried in her heart. Her family's letter still lingered in her thoughts, reminding her that her presence in the village, her growing closeness to the shy farmer, could not last forever without consequences. She spent long hours alone in the fields, walking among the crops, her thoughts tangled with hope and fear. She loved the quiet rhythm of the farm, the smell of soil after rain, the gentle presence of the farmer nearby. But she also knew she could not ignore her responsibilities, the traditions that had shaped her life from the beginning. The Apache girl had always been proud of her independence, her strength, and her ability to face life on her own. But now, with the farmer in her life, she realized that strength alone was not enough. The shy farmer noticed her distance immediately. She had always been open and warm during their daily work, but lately she seemed withdrawn, her smiles more fleeting, her laughter softer. He tried to speak with her, but each attempt was met with hesitation or a polite deflection. His heart ached with worry. He wanted to ask her directly about the letter, about her family, about the tension he saw in her eyes. But his fear of saying the wrong thing held him back. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with gold, he decided he could no longer wait. He found her walking near the edge of the field, her hands trailing over the tall grass. "We need to talk," he said softly, approaching her carefully. She looked at him, her eyes shadowed with worry. "About what?" she asked, though her voice betrayed the fact that she already knew.
"About us," he said, choosing his words slowly. "I cannot ignore what is happening between us."
"I care about you more than I thought possible, but I also see your worry, and I want to understand."
The Apache girl stopped walking, taking a deep breath. She had feared this conversation for weeks, unsure if she would have the courage to speak honestly.
Now, facing him, She realized that silence would only deepen the distance she felt. "I care about you too," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Wrath. "More than I thought I could. But my family, my people. They expect me to follow a path I do not fully choose for myself. And I do not know how to reconcile that with what I feel here, with you." The farmer nodded, understanding more than she realized. "We cannot change what others expect of you," he said gently.
But we can decide what we want together.
"We can choose to face this, or we can let fear decide for us." Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled faintly. The words he spoke were simple, yet they carried courage, hope, and an understanding she had longed to hear. For the first time she felt that her heart did not have to be torn in two. Perhaps it could hold both her love for him and her respect for her family, if she had the courage to act.
The days that followed were filled with small yet meaningful steps.
The Apache girl began to speak openly about her fears, her hopes, and her dreams. She told the farmer about her childhood, about lessons learned from her elders, and about the moments when she had felt most alone. In turn, the farmer shared more about his own life, the quiet joys of the farm, his early struggles, and the simple happiness he found in routine. Through these conversations, they began to see each other more clearly, beyond initial impressions, beyond fear and hesitation. Desk. One afternoon, while tending to the fields together, she stopped and looked at him.
"I have realized something," she said quietly.
"I cannot live my life only according to what others expect. I must follow my heart, even if it frightens me. And my heart, it tells me that I want you in my life, not just as a friend, but as someone who can walk beside me through everything." The farmer's chest swelled with emotion. He had feared rejection, feared that her family's expectations would overshadow their bond, but now her words brought clarity. He took her hand in both of his, holding it gently. "Bah, and I want you in my life," he said. "I may be shy and I may not always have the right words, but I promise to stand by you, to support you, and to face whatever comes with you."
The Apache girl's eyes shone with relief and happiness.
For the first time, she felt that the weight she had carried for so long, the loneliness, the fear, the tension between duty and desire, was easing. She had found someone who saw her fully, who valued her strength and her vulnerability alike, and who was willing to face life's uncertainties with her. But courage, she realized, would be tested. The news of her family's expectations could not be ignored forever. She had to confront the reality that staying in the village meant making a choice, and that choice would not be simple. She decided to write a letter to her family explaining her feelings honestly. She told them about her life in the village, about the quiet farmer who had shown her kindness, understanding, and companionship, and about the love she had come to feel. Respect for tradition, but also of her desire to make decisions for herself. Writing the letter was not easy. Each word carried the weight of fear, hope, and determination. The farmer stood by her as she wrote, offering quiet support. He did not try to influence her words. Instead, he reminded her that, whatever happened, she had the right to follow her own path. Presence gave her courage, a steady anchor in a world that had often felt uncertain. Days later, after sending the letter, she received a response. Her family acknowledged her feelings with surprise, but also with respect. They did not fully understand her choices, but they recognized her sincerity and the thought she had put into her decisions. It was not a simple approval, but it was enough to give her confidence that she could move forward without severing the ties that mattered to her. With this newfound clarity, the Apache girl and the shy farmer began planning their future together, carefully considering how to balance her cultural heritage with the life they wished to build. They talked about the seasons ahead, about tending the farm, and about the ways they could support each other's dreams. Each conversation, Each shared task strengthened their connection and deepened their trust. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, they walked through the fields hand in hand. The Apache girl looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and affection.
I feel stronger now, she said softly. Not because I am taller or stronger than others, but because I have someone who believes in me, who understands me, and who is willing to face life with me.
The farmer smiled, a quiet, content smile. And I feel stronger too, he said. Because I have you, and because you've shown me that courage is not just facing the world alone, but facing it together. In the weeks that followed, they continued to nurture both the farm and their relationship. Every task, whether planting seeds, tending animals, or sharing meals, became an opportunity to grow closer. They laughed together, shared stories, and quietly celebrated the small joys of life. Even challenges, such as unexpected storms or difficult tasks, were faced together, each obstacle strengthening their bond. Through it all, the Apache girl discovered a new sense of freedom. She realized that following her heart did not mean abandoning her roots. It meant choosing how to honor them while creating a life that reflected her true self. The farmer learned that love required not only patience and gentleness, but also courage and honesty. Together, they began to understand that life's challenges were not barriers to love, but opportunities to strengthen it. By the end of spring, their bond had transformed into something deeper than friendship. It was a quiet, steady love built on respect, understanding, and shared experiences. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and the weight of expectation, and emerged stronger, united by the courage to follow their hearts. The Apache girl no longer felt the ache of loneliness that had once haunted her, and the shy farmer had discovered a confidence and joy he had never known before, simply by standing beside someone who believed in him as he believed in her. In the soft glow of the evening, they sat together on the fence at the edge of the field, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The world was calm, the air warm, and the promise of tomorrow stretched before them. They had faced the challenges that had seemed so daunting, and now together they could face anything. In each other they had found not only love but courage, understanding, and a quiet strength that would carry them forward no matter what lay ahead. And so, with hearts united and hope restored, the giant Apache girl and the shy farmer embraced the life they had chosen, one of partnership, trust, and a love that had grown stronger through patience, honesty, and courage. For the first time in a long while, both felt complete, not because life had been easy, but because they had faced it together, hand in hand, ready for whatever the future might hold. The early morning sun cast a golden light over the fields, painting everything with warmth and life. The giant Apache girl and the shy farmer stood side by side, surveying the land they had nurtured together. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of freshly tilled soil and blooming flowers. For the first time in a long while, the Apache girl felt a deep sense of peace. The weight of uncertainty and fear that had shadowed her heart was lifting. She had made her choice, and she no longer feared the unknown because she would face it alongside the farmer who had become her anchor. The village had begun to notice a change in her. Where once her presence had seemed distant and slightly intimidating, now she moved with quiet confidence and warmth. The shy farmer had changed too. Though still humble and reserved, he carried himself with a subtle assurance, born from the courage he had discovered through love and understanding. Together they seemed to complement each other, two halves of a whole, quietly strong and patient. That morning, the Apache girl and the farmer decided to take a walk beyond the fields. They followed a narrow path that led to the edge of a small forest, where the sunlight filtered through the leaves in soft beams. Birds chirped overhead, and the rustle of leaves and the gentle wind made the world feel alive and full of promise. They walked slowly, hand in hand, speaking little but communicating everything through gestures, glances, and the steady rhythm of shared footsteps. "I never imagined life could feel like this," she said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was gentle, reflective.
I always thought I would have to carry everything alone, that independence meant solitude, but now
I see that strength does not mean facing life by yourself. Strength can be sharing it with someone who understands you. Spectacular. He looked at her, his dark eyes warm and steady.
And I never thought I could feel this way about anyone.
Bait. I have lived a quiet, simple life, and I thought that was enough. But you have shown me that life is brighter when someone stands beside you, when someone believes in you, and when you believe in them. The Apache girl squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had built. They reached a small clearing in the forest, where sunlight dappled the ground, creating a patchwork of light and shadow. Here they stopped, taking in the beauty of the world around them. Peace. It was a moment free of expectation, free of worry, a rare pause in the rhythm of life that allowed them to breathe and simply exist together.
I have something to ask you, the farmer said, his voice slightly hesitant.
He shifted on the soft earth, choosing his words carefully. I want us to face everything together. Not just today, not just the next season, but life itself. Will you stay by my side no matter what comes? The Apache girl felt her heart swell, break. She had longed for this kind of affirmation, but hearing it spoken so openly, so sincerely, made the hope within her bloom into certainty.
Yes, she said, her voice steady and warm.
I will stay by your side, not because I have no other path, but because I choose this path, with you, with my heart open, and without fear.
They embraced, a gentle and firm holding that spoke of commitment, trust, and the courage to face life together.
For a long while they remained there, simply holding each other, letting the quiet of the forest wrap around them like a protective blanket. In that moment, the Apache girl understood something essential. Love was not about grand gestures or dramatic choices. It was about presence, trust, understanding, and the courage to stand together in both joy and hardship. After their embrace, they returned to the village, walking side by side along familiar paths that now seemed brighter and more inviting. Villagers watched them with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. Some whispered about the Apache girl and the shy farmer, noting how they had changed. Where once there had been hesitation and distance, now there was warmth, confidence, and a quiet harmony that drew people in. Even those who had doubted the union could not ignore the sincerity and devotion that radiated from them. Over the following weeks, they began to plan for their life together more concretely. They discussed ways to tend the farm more efficiently, to plant new crops, and to ensure the animals were well cared for. They also talked about the future beyond the village, dreaming quietly of journeys they might take together, places they could explore, and experiences they could share. Each plan, each conversation, strengthened their bond and deepened their understanding of each other. The Apache girl shared stories of her homeland, teaching the farmer about her culture, her people, and the traditions that had shaped her. He listened with respect and curiosity, asking questions and showing genuine interest. Through these exchanges, they built a bridge between her past and their shared present, creating a space where love could flourish without abandoning identity or heritage. One evening, as they prepared a simple meal together, the Apache girl paused and looked at the farmer. "I have realized something important," she said softly. "Love does not mean giving up who you are. It means finding someone who accepts you completely, who stands beside you through everything, and who encourages you to grow. And I have found that with you." He smiled, a quiet and content smile. "And I have realized that love is not just about feelings. It is about courage, patience, and commitment. It is about choosing every day to support each other, to understand each other, and to face the world together.
I feel lucky to have found that with you.
Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The seasons changed, bringing new challenges and new joys.
Storms tested their resilience, while bountiful harvests brought satisfaction and celebration. Through it all, they faced life together, sharing both the labor and the laughter, the quiet worries and the small triumphs. Each day strengthened their partnership and their love, teaching them that life's beauty was found not in perfection but in the shared effort, understanding, and mutual respect that shaped their journey. The Apache girl's connection to her family also evolved. With her courage and clarity, she maintained contact with her people, sharing her life honestly and respectfully. Though her choices were different from the path her family had initially envisioned, they began to see her happiness and the depth of her bond with the farmer. Their acceptance, though gradual, became another source of strength for her, reinforcing the understanding that love, respect, and independence could coexist. One warm summer evening, the Apache girl and the farmer walked along the edge of their fields, watching the golden light spill across the land. The air was filled with the soft chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. They paused, standing together in quiet reflection. "Do you remember when we first met at the market?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips.
He chuckled softly. Yes.
I was nervous, and you were larger than life. I didn't know how to approach you without frightening you or myself. And now?" she asked, her eyes twinkling.
"Now," he said, squeezing her hand gently, "I cannot imagine life without you. You have become my companion, my teacher, my friend, and my heart. Life feels brighter because we face it together." They stood in silence, letting the moment stretch, filled with gratitude, love, and the quiet joy of a life shared. The Apache girl rested her head briefly on his shoulder, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. She realized that all the fear, all the uncertainty, and all the challenges they had faced had led them to this moment of peace, clarity, and unity. Life continued, full of its ordinary routines and extraordinary small moments. They celebrated harvests, cared for animals, shared meals with the villagers, and occasionally traveled to nearby towns to trade goods. Every experience, no matter how small, was richer because they faced it together. Their love was quiet, steady, and unshakable, a love that had grown stronger through patience, courage, and understanding. And so, the giant Apache girl and the shy farmer built a life together rooted in trust, respect, and deep affection. They had faced fears, misunderstandings, and external expectations, and emerged stronger, united by choice and by heart. Breaths. She no longer felt the ache of loneliness that had haunted her youth, and he no longer carried the hesitations that had kept him quiet and uncertain. Together, they had found a love that was real, enduring, and life-changing. Years later, when villagers spoke of the Apache girl and the shy farmer, they did so with admiration and warmth. People remembered the quiet girl who had once seemed distant and the shy man who had lived a simple life, and how they had grown into a partnership full of courage, understanding, and deep, abiding love. Their story became one of hope, a reminder that true connection comes not from circumstance or ease, but from the courage to trust, to communicate, and to face life together in the soft glow of evening. As the fields stretched endlessly around them and the sun dipped below the horizon, the Apache girl and the farmer stood together. Hand in hand, they watched the world grow quiet, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it as one.
Their journey had begun with a chance encounter, a simple act of kindness, and a quiet connection, and it had grown into a life full of love, courage, and shared strength.
But in that moment, both understood the truth that had guided them all along. Happiness was not about perfection, nor was it about avoiding fear or challenge. It was about finding someone who sees you fully, accepts you completely, and chooses to walk beside you through every season of life. And they had found that in each other, a love that would endure, a bond that would grow, and a life that would always be richer because it was shared.